So we're nearly there. Last 2 chapters of Ecclesiastes. So I want to ask you, are you a glass half empty or a glass half full kind of girl? If you're a scientist, you could say it's all full, it's just water or air. But anyway, are you a pessimist or an optimist? Or maybe you're somewhere in between. Often, optimists don't really love Ecclesiastes. It's a bit too doomy and gloomy and limited, not enough heaven perspective in there. Sometimes women don't really like Ecclesiastes until something rough has happened in life. There was one of the women in my Bible studies when I went through this book a number of years ago, and she hated it all the way through. And then a couple of years later, she wrote me a letter after I left town and said, I get it now. Life is hell. Something had happened that had caused her to lose her self-identity and much of her ministry. But even for the optimist who's in a good spot in life right now, there's a lot to learn from Ecclesiastes. And I'm thinking that it's really, these last 2 chapters are going to really appeal to you optimists. But don't worry, if you're a pessimist, there's still enough predicted doom and gloom to keep you happy too. So what have we learned so far? In our first talk, we learned that we don't have control, a letdown. In our second talk, we learned that we can find meaning in life because God does have control. In the study, we learned that, the good die young, but it's still worth it. We need to be good anyway. And now we're going to look at how to live life under God's control. The 5 R's. And I really like these last 2 chapters, partly because I am by nature more optimistic, but partly because I'm active. I like to do something. And all the way through this debating, I'm thinking, but what do I do? Here you go. This is your doing bit, these 2 chapters. Now, at school, you get the 3 R's, but today I'm going to finish off your day of learning with the 5 R's. And yes, there is a test. So make sure you stay awake. The first R, risk it all in faith. Now, we heard those verses read out, and they are a call to live life under God's control, risking it. I like how that new translation had it. My old NIV says, cast your bread upon the waters. And my first thought was, bread to the ducks. And it certainly doesn't come back to you after many days. No, it just doesn't. It either gets gobbled up or it sinks. But these verses aren't about casting your bread on the water to the ducks. They are about sea trade. Your bread, your livelihood, put it out there. And it's risky. You don't know whether your ship is going to sink or not, or come back. And so we get verse 2, diversify. Portions to 7, yes, 8, because you don't know what disaster is out there. So spread out your risks. And then verse 3 and 4 go on into some of those risks. There's the wind and the clouds. And we don't know. If we really could control where the wind blew the clouds to drop the water, we wouldn't have so much strife like we have in Australia, would we? But no, it's risky. And we don't know when a tree is going to fall and where and how. And if it's going to, like I say, don't put your tent under the tree because it's just not worth it. Yeah, so there's risks out there. But don't be like the one who sits watching and waiting for the perfect time. There is no perfect time. That's verse 4. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. The best way to not succeed is don't try. Don't start. And too often we want to wait for just the right time. It says, no, risk it all. Get out there and start. Because there is so much we don't know. The path of the wind, how a body is formed. Now, science has helped us get a pretty good clue to a lot of that, and yet how often do the weather predictors get it wrong? Or you check it in the morning and there's no chance of rain, and by afternoon, oops. We don't understand it all, and we don't know it all. We cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. And so in this context, be active. Sow in the morning and at evening. Don't let your hands be idle, because you don't know. You don't know which way is going to bring the crop that you're seeking. What's the bottom line of these verses? Take risks, be active, because uncertainty is no excuse for inactivity. Don't let your ignorance and lack of control leave you paralyzed with fear. Now, it's easy to see how all of this would apply to the farmer or somebody investing money. But what about everyday living? Well, there are lots of risks. What about talking to someone who's grieving? Have you ever found yourself sitting there thinking, what should I say? And when's the right time? And maybe I should just sit back here and watch a bit, watch her face. And oh, Susie over there, yeah, she'd be much better at going and doing this job. And so you sit there watching and waiting. That's verse 4 kind of thinking. No! Get out there and do something. Cast your bread upon the waters. And if you're not sure what to say, start by listening. Ask them how they're feeling and what they miss. Here's another risk. Witnessing. Some people tell me that they don't witness because they aren't sure what they should say. And the consequences are so high. You don't want your friends to just walk away from God because of what you said. But I'll tell you a sure thing. They will walk away from God if they never hear about him. So risk it. And diversify, both to the one you're witnessing to and to the grieving person. Write a note. Say something. Do something nice. For you do not know which might bring a return. Now, 11 years ago, my husband and I became convinced that it was God's will for us to move from Tamworth to Parks. And I'd had my 3 little babies, well, 2 of them in Tamworth, and it was all like nice and safe. And I'm thinking, I don't want to move. And there were days where I was almost overwhelmed with the risk of it all. My allergies, would I be allergic to the manse? And it's awfully hard to say to a church, sorry. There's so many risks involved with moving. But if I didn't go, I would have been failing to trust God. One day, we've been at Parks for 11 years, and I'd kind of like it if we just stayed there forever. But one day, my husband will announce that he feels called to move on. And then it's going to be a little more complicated than the last move. I was joking with my kids about moving one day, and Allie said, she's my 15-year-old, she said, well, when we moved here, we were just animated baggage. And they were. I carried them along, and they squawked and squabbled. But now, she says, we can help you pack. I said, yeah, but that doesn't quite make it easier because you have so much stuff, and your lives are so complicated, and it's risky. But if we are paralyzed with fear, then we are not joining the venture to faith. I can risk it all because I have a big God who is wholly in control, making all things beautiful in their time. Some commentators have said that these verses are a call to join the venture of faith. And they don't explicitly mention faith, but the context of the rest of the verse and the rest of the book and chapter 5, so that you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things, reminds us that we're living here in his world under him. The question is, will we trust God with the uncertainties and take the risks of obedience? So here are a few more risks. We heard of one earlier today when they were interviewing the SRE teachers. There's a risky business. You don't know whether you'll get too sick or just finish the training and then the laws will change. We don't know. Do not be paralyzed with fear. And if you're a mother of young children and think, well, it's too hard, I can't get involved. I can never tell when my kids are going to cry or get sick. Children have this amazing way of needing to scream or fall over and hurt themselves in the middle of a church prayer. They just have the knack. Or if you're elderly and you're thinking, it's too hard for me to risk being involved because some days I wake up and I'm too sore. My arthritis is too much. Develop a network of people that can support you, that you can call on, and risk it. Get involved. And even for us in the middle, I'm past the little baby phase and I'm not quite up to the totally achy phase. But if you were going to be a Sunday school teacher, you can't control kids' reactions. You can't control what they had for breakfast and what kind of mood they come to your class in. Risk it all. The New Testament parallel would be the parable of the talents. We are to do something with the gifts that God has given us. And don't just do one thing and say, tick, I helped. Diversify. Sow in the morning and in the evening, for you do not know which will bring the crop. Don't procrastinate. Waiting till tomorrow is not likely to make it clearer. You know, there's no bolt from heaven saying, you will SRE today. No, it's not going to happen. So diversify. Get out there and trust that God is acting even when we can't understand it. There is no perfect time. So risk. The second R, rejoice. We need to be rejoicing in the life God has given us. Now, doesn't that appeal to the optimists? Yeah, let's rejoice. So let's have a look at the next couple of verses. Light is sweet. It pleases the eye to see the sun. The images of light and purity and sweetness, like you might think of savoring honey. Or if you don't like honey, savoring coffee. You know, there are good things in this life. And we are told in verse 8, enjoy them all. Yes, don't worry, doom and gloom is still coming. The second half of verse 8. And it's all still chabel, it's pointless. But you are commanded in verse 9, be happy. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Now, this isn't a call just to do anything, do what feels good, because judgment's still coming. That's the second half of that verse. So it's not a call to do anything, but it certainly is a call to rejoice and enjoy it. Living for Christ is not a killjoy kind of way to live. Some youth that I talk to think it would be the saddest, most restricted, horrible thing to become a Christian. And I would say, shame on us for portraying the Christian life as flat and joyless. It's not about a bunch of rules. We should be having fun. We should be reveling in the life that God has given us even more than the non-Christian, because we have God as our companion through this life, and we know the end of the story. One commentator said this, why is it that so many religious people's lives are instead characterized by fear and defensiveness, by a joy-suppressing legalism that is more concerned to do the right thing than to revel in God's blessings? We don't honor God when we fail to enjoy his creation, when we treat him as a mean-spirited party pooper. He's not. So what I'm trying to tell you is that part of fearing God, part of submitting to him, is to take seriously his call to enjoy this life. After all, it's the only life we get to live. And if verse 9 is the positive command, be happy. Verse 10 kind of deals with the other side, and get rid of the anxiousness. Get rid of the pain. Banish anxiety from your heart. Cast off troubles of your body. Now, I know the damage that anxiety can do. My daughter and a close friend are trapped in this disease. And sometimes it is heartbreaking. Instead of banishing anxiety or removing vexation, they dwell on it and consider the worst case scenarios. My friend will often say, but I think I'm going to die. Counseling does a bit of cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. And I think Ecclesiastes 11:10 is a bit of CBT. Instead of focusing on what we can't control, when cancer is going to strike and every little ache, you're searching the internet to figure out when you're going to die and why and when accidents are going to happen, get the bigger picture. Yes, life is rebel, but God is in control And there is so much to rejoice about. And so here are a few quick cognitive behavior swaps you can do in your head. You know, the psychologists are all about when you have this feeling, replace it with another one that's a little more realistic. So if you're sick and achy today, and there's bound to be some of you, you're alive. And if you're a celiac who wakes up most morning and really just wants a bowl of Nutri-Grain, that's me. Well, at least I live now when there are so many gluten-free products out there on the market. Verse 10 says, banish anxiety from your heart so that you can rejoice. As a teacher, I get told to make 2 positive comments for every constructive piece of criticism. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you catch yourself complaining, find 2 things to rejoice in. Count your many blessings, name them one by one. And cast off troubles and pain. You know, if there's pain relief, take it. You don't get any brownie points for getting to heaven and saying, oh, it's all right, I did everything the natural way. And you know, if just banish anxiety and cast off troubles of your body. I love it when people comment on how happy I am when they notice that I have the joy of the Lord. I want people around me to see that living life with God is worth it. And sometimes kids will say, why are you so happy, miss? You're always so happy. Do you just really love maths? And I do. But you know, there's lots more reasons to be happy. And sometimes they'll say, you're high on life. And I know I do have a bit of ADHD tendencies, but life has a lot to be excited about. Sometimes I sing Sunday school songs, or I bounce around with enthusiasm. My kids have kind of gotten over the being embarrassed about their crazy mother, and I'll whoop and holler, yeah! You can ask them, they'll tell you. And I try to watch my face, because any face is beautiful when it's smiling. And even the most perfect makeup airbrushed model is ugly when she's stressed and frowning. So what does your face say? Are you rejoicing in the little things that come through the day? Now, while I was thinking about this talk, I was working on these talks in the recent school holidays. And so I was home where my parents are in Narrabri, and my mother was chuckling away in the chair next to me. She was reading while I was typing away on my computer. I said, what are you reading? And what she read is perfect. It's perfect for today. So I had her read it to me so I could type it up. It's a little extract from a book called Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. And the background is there are some parents, pastors, living in genteel poverty in a tiny village in Cornwall, England. And they have 2 daughters, Molly and Biddy. And Molly's about to go back to India, and she's terribly busy. She's got so many things she needs to do, and she feels she must go and see her parents. And this is where we pick it up. Must you go? Said Biddy. Yes, I really think I must. You're a glutton for punishment. I've got a letter here from Mother. Molly, everything all right? No, all wrong as usual, said Biddy. Molly says, I even feel guilty about them being alone on their own for Christmas. I don't, said Biddy shortly. I ask them, of course, I always do, praying that they will refuse. And thank God they came up with all the usual excuses. It's Father's busy time. There's snow on the roads. The car is making a funny noise. Mother's little twinges of rheumatism. They are impossible. Dug deep into their rut. No point of trying to brighten their lives, because then they wouldn't have anything to moan about. Molly says, they're old. But Biddy replies, no, they're not. They've simply embraced decrepitude. Don't be like those parents. Rejoice. Decrepitude is coming, but don't embrace it too early. And that's a perfect lead into our next set of verses. And the next are, remember. If we're going to submit to God in his control of our lives, we need to remember him. And the next set of verses is bracketed by that call. 12:1, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before you die. And verse 6, remember him before the preciousness that is your life is smashed and broken. So we're going to look at the imagery in between these two verses before we explore the call to remember your Creator. And I'm just going to excuse myself to go blow my nose. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Nothing like sniffy to be a bit distracting. So this is a poem about the onset of age. And it's not something that just, I'm young and then tomorrow I'm old. It's not that simple. It's a long process before the days of trouble, when the years approach, the sun and the light and the moon, they grow dark, and life gets a bit pointless and empty. So it's a catastrophe of age that's happening. And verses 3-5 are talking about that, and they could be read as an allegory. So I'm going to share with you one way you could read it. And no matter which way it's read, that all means that your life is being undone, and it's not fun. So let's have a look at verse 3. When the keepers of the house tremble, your arms, and they start to get a bit wobbly and not so strong anymore. And the strong men stoop, your legs, you're a bit bow-legged and not so stable. When the grinders, your teeth, they cease because they all fell out. They're few. And those looking through the windows, well, you need stronger and stronger glasses, and they grow dim. And the doors to the street, your ears that kind of give you access to stuff beyond what you can see, they are closed. The sound of grinding fades. When men rise up, the sound of birds. So, that's the irony of it all. When you have time to sleep, you can't. Because you're awake in the middle of the night, because you just can't. When men are afraid of heights, have you ever noticed how the ground's getting further and further away and you're less and less certain of your footing? And the dangers in the streets. What's that sound? What was that? Did you see? And it gets more and more dangerous as you can't quite see it or hear it or understand it, and you won't be able to protect yourself from it. And the almond tree blossoms, gray hair, it's all white. And the grasshopper drags himself along. Sometimes it feels a bit draggy if you're having to clump along with a walker too. And desire is no longer stirred. All that was fun is dimming. And then man goes to his eternal home, and mourners go about the street. The catastrophe of age is happening to us all. Some of us faster than others. Some of us are further into the catastrophe, but it's still happening to all of us. And I hesitate to call it a catastrophe because the Bible gives great honor and respect to the elderly. There is an expectation that by having lived with God so long, they will be able to give counsel and the wisdom of experience, that they can be a helpful resource. And yet, too often, our culture doesn't say that. Out with the old. What's the point of talking to them anyway? They won't understand. They're out of date. Old-fashioned. We need to fight that. And women, if you won't tell somebody how old you are, why not? It's a reality. In 2 days' time, I get to be 48. In 2 more years, I get to plan a 50th. And in 30 more years, plus 2, I get to plan an 80th. Rejoice in every day that your Creator gives you, and do not throw yourself away. If I dishonor the elderly today, I'm throwing myself away in 20 years' time, or 40 or 50, depending how young you happen to be here. Give honor to the elderly. But having said that, we do need to face the catastrophe of age. Our culture tries to cover it up. We've got anti-wrinkling creams, and we've got no more grays, wash the gray. I love my little gray streak that's developing, but our culture wants to cover it up. And when we die, we cover it up, bodies in nice, clean caskets. Lots of places in the world, they see death all the time, but not here. And there's this growing tendency to think, just skip the whole lot and euthanize. But we can't escape it. And it is a catastrophe, the undoing of life. And in this context, there's a call. Remember your Creator now. And it's not a look back kind of remember. Remember when the good old days when things were proper. No, it's not a look back kind of remember. It's a look forward kind of remember. Death is coming. And keep that in mind, in the front of your head. Recall it to your thoughts. And then live your life now the way God wants you to. Remember that you are small, created, not in control. Remember that He is big, your Creator. God is in control. And having remembered that, choose to do something now before it's too late. Do something now before your body is unmade in this world. Well, how can we apply this? If you haven't yet given your life to Jesus, then don't wait. Remember your Creator. You don't know how long you have. Or if you're already becoming forgetful, that's happening to me. Memorize as much scripture as you can now, because there will come a day when you can't put anything new into your head. And I've seen that happen with older relatives. And if you're sitting here, oh no, that's so far off in the future, I don't have to worry about that. There will come a day where all you remember is what you know today. And the sooner you start putting God's word into your mind, the longer you will actually keep it. So you are never too young to start preparing for your old age. The woman you are today is shaping the woman you will be tomorrow. If your fingers are getting twisted and arthritic and it's harder and harder to stretch them, to play the piano for Sunday school or to bake those cakes for the church stall, well, do it as long as you can until you really, really can't. And each time you start to feel your body ache and hurt, let it be a reminder. Remember your Creator and live for Him to the utmost of your ability now while you still have ability. Don't embrace decrepitude. And you know, even if dying takes a long, painful time, die with dignity. There's a lie out there, and that lie says it's dignified to die with all of your faculties intact. But that's not dignity. That's trying to escape and hide and run away. Dying with dignity is about submitting to your Creator until the silver cord is shattered. Until the end. Remember your Creator. Fourth R, reevaluate. This one's just one verse. Verse 8. Because now we've got to the end of the sermon. The teacher is finished, and now we have the author of Ecclesiastes talking to us about what the teacher has said. He's giving us kind of the summary line. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. Short as a breath, elusive as a vapor, incomprehensible and absurd. And when it's all been said and done, that's the take-home message of Ecclesiastes. And if we are really going to live under God's control, we need to regularly reevaluate what we're doing. Does it match this message? And so I want to challenge you to have a bit of a Sabbath quiet time, to do a self-diagnostic. So a slightly longer quiet time than you would normally have, somewhere in your week when you can find silence. Be alone from your computer if you're a working woman and it slides into every part of your day, or from your children. And spend some time doing a diagnostic. I used to do it when my kids were little on a night that Stephen went to a meeting, because he was out and I'd put them to bed and voila, just me and God. Now, they don't go to bed so early, but they don't get up so early either. So on a Sunday morning, when my husband goes out at 5 a.m. to get ready for his sermon for the morning, I don't quite get up at 5, but I get up at 6, and I've got a whole hour to myself. until he comes back in and we can have that sweet, savory coffee. So I have that whole hour. I've found a spot in my week. And I challenge you to find a spot in your week when you can have a Sabbath quiet time, to do a reevaluating, a self-diagnostic. And when you do that, ask yourself questions. I have to ask myself, am I still chasing gain? You know, it's fun to be a working woman. I get all kinds of honor and respect being a working woman at work. But am I chasing gain? Where is my value? Am I trying to still be in control? Greta, nice little God organizing her nice little world. Am I arguing with God, insisting on answers? Or have I accepted that sometimes it is incomprehensible? What do I value? Is it Chabel? Or am I remembering my Creator in my youth, risking it all in faith, rejoicing in the gifts that he gives me? And sometimes you can't wait for your weekly Sabbath thing. You actually need to stop and do a little reevaluate partway along. So next time you catch yourself wrapped up in anxiety, reevaluate. Or full of doubt and anger, reevaluate. Unable to sleep because you're trying to piece it all together, get up. Read your Bible, reevaluate. Or you're so busy that you've lost the joy of living, then it's time to reevaluate. That one hits me the most. It is very easy in today's world to be so busy that all of life becomes flat and tasteless. You have to reevaluate your priorities or we get caught in the hustle and bustle of our meaningless Chabel lives. Reevaluate. Well, we finished the teacher's sermon, so it's time for a test. Do you like tests? Hands up if you like tests. Come on, there's got to be a couple. Yep. See those guys? They're probably the ones that don't like essays and assignments. But anyway, why do teachers give you tests? And no, it's not to torture you, and it's not just because they need numbers to write report cards. It's because they want to see if their teaching actually had an effect. Did you learn anything? Can you do anything with that information that they've given you? And so now it's test time for us. Will you react? Will you do something with the teaching that has been given? Verses 9 and 10 tell us the teaching was pretty good. Now, not only was the teacher wise, he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs, and the teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. It's worth applying. And verse 11 reminds us that it might not be comfortable to apply it. The words of the wise are like goads. Their collected sayings firmly embedded nails. A bit like a cattle prod. Not a taser that's strong enough to zzz, and you're having a heart attack, but a little poking electric stick that's just enough to make you go, oh, and get back into doing the right thing. Or that the nails thing is a bit like a horsewhip with a few little wobbly, nasty, spiky bits, just to get you jumping again. So it's not going to be easy. It'd be much easier to just hold on to my pain and anger, or to keep insisting that God answer my questions. But don't take the painkiller of ignoring God's teaching. We have to react to the messages that we've heard today from Ecclesiastes. We have to do something. And look at verse 12. This is another, probably the second most famous. Chapter 3 bit was the first. This is the second, especially from year 12 students. Verse 12, of making many books, there is no end, and much study wearies the body. It's easy to get study weary, but don't do that. I like how one of the commentators put it when talking about this verse. He said, so often we work and work and work to study the Bible, and we revel in the nitty-gritty of what the Hebrew there or the Greek here and the new context, and oh, look at that. And we debate in our Bible studies, and we write our little books, and we read our little books, and we get so study weary that we forget to do anything about it. Don't do that. React. Apply God's teaching to you even when it's a bit uncomfortable and cattle prodish. And verse 13 tells us that when we've heard and studied it all, we've got to do something. Now all has been heard, and here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commands, for this is the whole duty of man. Have you ever wondered what God expects from you? Well, here it is. Fear and obey. Trust and obey. That fear isn't like, oh, he's going to splat me. It's like, whoa, God, you are so big. And the only proper response that I can have to you is to submit and then obey. So here's the test. What are you going to do with today's teaching? Are you going to go home and rave about the organization of the day? It was pretty good. Or rave about the band and the music and all the people you got to catch up with and how uplifted you felt. And you can do all of that. But the real test is, what are you going to do about this stuff next week? Or next month? Or next time you feel like God pooped life on your head? There is, of course, another reaction you might take. You might go home and whinge. Whinge about the band, whinge about how the music wasn't to your taste, how the speaker prattled on for nearly 40 minutes every time they let her up there, or how the food wasn't that good, or how Betty snubbed me. Don't do that either. That would be like Molly and Biddy's parents. Molly, everything all right? No, all wrong as usual, said Biddy. Instead, take risks in faith. Rejoice in every blessing that God has given you. Remember your Creator. Call that to the forefront of your thinking. Reevaluate your life. Does it match reality? And most of all, react to God's teaching for you. Now it has all been heard, truly. There is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil.